Hello, I'm Dr. Gloria Horsley.
And I'm her daughter, Dr. Heidi Horsley.
Heidi and I want to welcome you to Open to Hope Conversations, the podcast.
We believe that the greatest gift you can give yourself after a loss is hope, using this moment to connect with others who have not only survived but thrived.
So let's get started. Welcome to the Open to Hope Show. I'm your host, Dr. Gloria Horsley, and I have a co-host with me today, Frank Powers.
Thank you, Gloria.
And Frank's my partner, and Frank and I are actually writing a book together.
Open to Love. Fearless Dating After 60.
That's right. Open to Love, Fearless Dating After 60. So I have a long-term friend that we're going to have on the show today, Frank. And Frank's a psychologist, as am I. And we are going to have Barbara Hopkinson on the show, and she has been a friend for years. Barbara is founder of Butterfly's Journey, a nonprofit for resilience after loss. She does the grief recovery method specialist, and she's a retired IBM executive, and she remains resilient after the loss of 3 children. Wow, Barbara, her husband and both of her parents. And she's an author and creator of the Faces of Resilience photo shoot. She has an honorary humanitarian doctorate, and she lives near Boston. Barbara, thank you for being on the show today.
Fabulous. Thank you for having me, Gloria, and nice to see you again, Frank.
I hope people will go to Open to Hope and find Barbara Hopkinson's other shows that we've done and her TV shows where we've talked about the loss of her children. And today we're going to go on to spouse loss and online dating. So tell us about, you lost your spouse, and then tell us how you got to online dating.
Okay, my first experience with online dating was after my first marriage of 30 years fell apart after my 21-year-old son died. And I started online dating, and then that was a positive result because I found my second husband on Match.com.
How did you decide to go online, and how did that work for you?
And what were you drawn by?
I was over 50, and it's not that easy to find people, right? In bars or restaurants, or, after you get out of college, it's a little difficult. But I also had a technology background. I worked in software for 30 years. I worked at IBM for 10 years. And so doing things with a technical base was very familiar to me. It felt like a really natural extension.
That's a real advantage. It's a real
and it was fun. Yeah, because I wasn't afraid of it. It felt comfortable. And you have to learn to filter. So I tried a few different things. I think I tried eHarmony, I tried Match, I tried one of the other back then. And I ended up finding Jim on Match. Okay. And it's funny because I could tell he wasn't all that computer literate. Back then you started with emails versus texts. And so it'd be emailing and it'd be very short, and I'd kid him about it. But I said, it's okay, because that particular weekend we were talking, my sink drain I had to have it all taken apart. I couldn't find the parts. So he actually came with a handyman. Our first day was he showed up with a handyman and fixed my sink.
Smart man. Smart
man. So that was a good thing.
That's a good start.
Fabulous. And you were with him for how long?
12 and a half years total, but 11, we were married 11 and a half years.
And then he passed away?
He died suddenly of a widowmaker heart attack on his way to work,
wow.
A quarter of a mile from the house. We had tickets for a show that night. Total surprise.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. That's a real shocker.
I thought I was ready probably a little less than 2 years after.
What happened that made you think that's okay, I'm ready to get back in the game again?
Well, I was lonely. I'm an extreme extrovert. I really am not that crazy about living alone.
Yeah. It's not very good, is it?
No. And I just, I wanted love in my life. And to me, I met my second husband. I thought it would be okay to go online again, and it felt comfortable. And I really thought that was the best way to meet people, because at least then you get to see something about their profile and their personality and their picture before you actually meet them. And then there's filtering, right? Because so for a while you talk or text or email, and you can figure out whether or not the personality might make sense. And then after a while you talk on the phone. And if that goes well, then you might meet in person. There's all these filters, right? So, and then by then, usually in 1 or 2 dates, you can tell in person whether it's no good. So I figured it felt natural to me. I had met my first husband on Match. What I didn't realize, and in hindsight, I was targeted as a widow.
Wow.
Wow.
Tell us
So
about that.
I was targeted by an expert as a widow. I was only unmatched maybe 2 weeks.
Okay.
And this guy came along, very charming, very handsome, younger than me. And I'm high energy. As Gloria knows, she's high energy too.
Right,
So that felt all
Yes.
natural, right?
right.
Yeah.
And I just decided, I said, okay, well, again, looking back at it in hindsight, this guy got me to fall in love with him.
Mhm.
We did several video calls. He was supposedly a half an hour from me. I checked out the address. It existed, but he had this is before the scams were so public, right?
Mhm.
So
Sure.
he had this job he had to go to within a week. And so we didn't meet in person. We just kept talking.
Oh,
So
Video
you're on the
calling,
way
and
to
then-
avoid direct contacts. That's one of
And
the things.
yes,
Yeah.
and so but again, I was talking to him and talking with his kids also. So anyway, bottom line is
with
I
his
found
kids, he even had kids
he had
come
6
on.
and 8 year old kids, which
Oh, my
In the
in
gosh.
the
he
long
was a
term, I was
pro.
expecting to marry this man and raise his kids. I mean, that's how much I fell in love with him.
Oh, my God.
Okay.
And
Very
the kids-
charming, really
Oh,
knew how to read me and mold himself to be my perfect man.
Okay. Wow.
And then, of course, he asked me, I became the victim of a romance scam. So initially it was a little bit to help his children with a situation. And then it was help a little more because he got hung up with customs or something where he couldn't get back. He thought he was going to be back with less than 3 months. And then to help him with that. And then the rest of it was all to get the original amount back, which was all promised to be back within 30 days.
Mhm.
Well,
So
long
looking
story
back on
short,
it-
this went on for 2 years and he disappeared. And when
Looking
I
back-
talked to an expert later,
Mhm.
she told me I was the victim of a global crime syndicate out of Nigeria.
Oh, really?
Very sophisticated, very technical. They do things like taking the sound off of videos and pretending to be somebody else.
Looking back on it, what would you tell people to be looking out for? And what kind of things would you suggest a person do if they have any question whatsoever about whether this is a legitimate person or not?
Oh, it's hard when you're in the throes of really being lonely and wanting
Yeah.
to have love
Exactly.
to be too skeptical and suspicious because you want it for yourself so badly. So
well,
if you
you'd
can
also
give-
been successful before.
I met my second husband on Match,
Yes,
so I wasn't
absolutely.
suspicious of this. And the publicity was not out yet about scams. Now
Mhm.
my son did try to stop me partway in, and by then I was hooked and I wasn't listening. And
Oh,
that's common. People don't listen. So
Yeah.
that's why it's hard. You really need to never, first of all, I mean, this is really so obvious, right? Don't give anybody money.
Yeah.
And second of all, just find a way to prove it and find a way to meet them in person. And if they're not meeting in person after a reasonable amount of time,
You know
be
something.
very, very suspicious.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, what I find is that you don't listen when you're in too deep, especially if what's happening is that you're in love. And I was absolutely in love.
Did you date again online? Now you're with
Yes,
somebody
so
now.
I finally got past that, and it has lots of ripple effects actually that I'm digging out from now. Finally, after a couple more years, because that made me back off, right? Because I would not only felt the grief of losing the love and the betrayal, and then the money, and all the ripple effects. It took me a couple of years to get back into it, but I really think it's the only way to meet people these days, because
Right.
especially after COVID, not only was nobody going anywhere for a couple of years, but people don't meet and talk the way they used to before COVID. You don't just talk to strangers in the way that you used to, really,
That's
so much in places to meet. So I decided to go back on. I stay away from Match, but I went on 2 or 3 others, eHarmony, Silver Singles, and I finally
You met on Silver Singles.
on Google. That's like one of the best ones for people over 50.
I
Yeah.
think
And
so.
I tried chemistry.com, that didn't work. My friend Herb, who runs the Widower Support Network, recommended eHarmony. And I tried that a couple of times. It didn't work for me. I met a couple of nice people, but whatever, it didn't work. Anyway, a girlfriend of mine drove me nuts until I went on Bumble. And
Oh,
Bumble is created by women and run by women, and only women can contact men for the first time. Man
Oh.
can't contact a woman. They can express interest, but the woman chooses whether or not to contact them, and then they have a 24-hour time limit.
Do you think that works better?
In my case, it did. So I actually found some people, and I set a radius, a 50-mile radius, but this one gentleman, Barry, from upstate New York, expressed an interest from outside of that. There's a way to do that. And by the way, isn't a 4-hour drive kind of far? And he gave me a charming answer about not putting a distance barometer on the love of a good woman. And he's a
Oh.
Special Forces Army veteran. He's a widower and a bereaved dad. So we have a lot in common. So anyway, so we started dating, and we still are. We're doing very well. We're just dealing with
4
distance
hours
right
away.
now.
Have you met him in person yet?
Yes. Oh, yes. Multiple times.
Oh, great.
Yeah. No, I wouldn't have. Yeah. Back in, I think at first, I think he got COVID, then I got COVID, but right after that. So we went, we did the FaceTime thing for about a month or so. And then we met in person and ended up spending a couple of weekends together. And then it's just dealing with the distance, right? Because it's a struggle until we kind of both sort out what it is that we're doing.
Uh-huh. All right. Well, Frank and I, decided I would write a book on dating, widows dating, because, I like to write and I try to figure out my life, and it's lonely, and you do want to be with somebody. It's really lonely. And so I decided to go online, and Frank was the second person I met online, and I met him in person right away.
Lucky
So,
you. Lucky you.
I
You only
know,
kiss one frog to find a prince.
Lucky
Kissed
me.
a lot of frogs.
Yeah, so we have a great relationship, and I have a lot of good things to say about online dating, but I think, you bring up such
I
important
think you bring a
points.
real reality that most people are not as fortunate as Gloria being able to do it so quickly, finding someone. But it is you have to be a really good consumer. You've got to really be careful and check people out. And I know, like you said, once you're really involved with someone and you really like them, you don't want to necessarily get any bad news, but bad news is really helpful and it can save you a lot.
Yes. I mean, you really do. You're so hopeful, right? For finding
Sure.
that love.
Well,
and
it's
not
so
being
nice
alone
to be
anymore.
with somebody. I mean, right away,
Right.
you're talking to somebody, you're not feeling that loneliness, you have hope. Thank you so much for being on the show and talking about this. It's really important.
Yes, I think your information is very helpful for people that we're targeting your book for, because I think your experience is real and it's really, really helpful. So thank you so much.
And the
Oh,
other thing I
welcome.
love
Thanks for
about it,
having me.
Barbara, is that you pursued it.
Yes.
I
And you
mean,
stayed in there.
Tell us
Well, thank you.
where we can find you.
All right. So it's, my website is abutterfliesjourney.org, and that's possessive, not plural. So it's FLYS. We do 3 main things. And there's a free resource center, not as big as Open to Hopes, but it's a free resource center. There is, I'm an advanced certified grief recovery method specialist, which is the only evidence-based methodology in the world for grief, and it's been used 40 years on 6 continents. And then I do Faces of Resilience photo shoots, which is all about open expression of grief, loss, and love. And so butterfliesjourney.org and facesofresilience.org, or the gallery is in either place. But people, it's hard for them to express about their grief, right? And not encouraged in our culture. So we urge them to say something meaningful to them, and then I write it on their skin with a washable marker. And we take their photo, professionally edit it, and send it to them. And it's very cathartic for them to do it. And then it's a catalyst for them to talk about their grief when they get the photo with their friends and relatives.
Yep,
So-
fabulous.
Good.
Well,
Which is
thank you
good.
again for being on, and I'll see you soon, I hope.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on. Have a good day.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody, for joining us on the show today. And Frank and I, and all of Open to Hope, want to say to you, if you've lost hope, please lean on ours until you find your own, and God bless.
I'm Dr. Heidi Horsley. You have been listening to Open to Hope, the podcast. You can follow Open to Hope on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. To learn more, visit us at opentohope.com and go to Apple Podcasts to subscribe.
I'm Dr. Gloria Horsley. Join us again next week for another Open to Hope conversation, where we invite you to lean on our hope until you find your own.